It was April of 2015. Me, my girlfriends, and my little brother, who was 9 years old, had gone to a small nearby movie theater on a Wednesday night to see the horror movie It Follows. We usually went late on weekends to get the whole theater to ourselves, plus I had off on Thursdays that semester. When we entered the theater, at first it seemed like we were the only ones inside, but then my little brother pointed somebody out. It was a man in a dark gray hoodie sitting in the top left corner seat in the theater. It was a little sketchy, but nobody would really give it a second thought. We picked upper middle row seats with a railing in front so we could put our feet up, and we each sat with an empty seat between us for more room. I know, that sounds weird to do with my girlfriend with me, but having my brother there made it a different story. I was sitting the closest to the edge, and therefore the closest to the one other guy in the room besides us. Within 5 minutes, the previews were over and the movie was starting. The lights in the theater dimmed to darkness, and the only light now was the light projecting from the screen. My little brother took out his bag of candies he snuck in and started to eat them obnoxiously loud. About 5 minutes into the movie, over my brother's loud candy wrapper noises, which we told him to stop for the record, I thought I heard a pretty loud sound come from above and behind us. I waited a few seconds to sneak a glance behind us, and saw that the guy that was sitting in the top corner had moved down a row, which was odd. But again, I didn't give it more than a second thought. Another 5 minutes later, when the movie was already starting to get interesting, I heard something from behind us again. I turned when I thought it wouldn't be too obvious, and again, the guy was a whole row closer to us. I leaned to my girlfriend and said while chuckling, "Don't look, but that guy keeps moving closer to the screen." She shrugged her shoulders and didn't even show interest in checking. I told myself if he did it again, then I would have a problem, and managed to get back into the movie. I'd say another 5 minutes later, without even hearing anything this time, I just turned around out of curiosity and saw the man a whole row closer, but this time he wasn't at the last seat of the row anymore. He was moved further down the row, closer to us. Now he was only 3 rows behind us. I nudged my girlfriend and she turned around. Then she looked at me and gave me a confused, concerned kind of look. She asked me if we should move, and I said definitely not. At this point, I wasn't able to pay attention to the movie anymore. Even though I was facing the screen, I felt like the man's gaze was hitting me in the back of the head. I told myself if he moves closer, I would turn around and firmly ask him what he was doing. But then I also thought, what if I'm looking too much into this? What if he's just a normal guy who happens to keep switching seats for a better view? Once more, I turned around, and the man was only 2 rows away from us now, closer to the center of the row, or rather directly behind us, and his head was just completely down looking at his lap. I didn't even bother to check what he was looking at. He could have been looking at nothing. I literally opened my mouth ready to say something, but I was just too much of a coward. I was only 16 last year and pretty skinny. My little brother got up during a slow part of the movie to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, I turned to see if the man had gotten closer again, this time actually ready to say something. But I was shocked to see nobody behind us. It was completely empty. I told my girlfriend, and she said good. But then I stood up in pure fear, thinking of my little brother. Telling my girlfriend to wait there and running out of the room and into the empty theater halls, I saw the man in the gray hoodie entering the men's bathroom down the hall. Fearing for my little brother's safety, I ran down the hall toward the bathroom, opened the door, and saw the man literally on his knees peeking under the 2 stall doors. Then he looked at me, and at the same time I heard my little brother call me from down the hall. I saw him waving me over in confusion. I ran to him, got my girlfriend out of the movie room, and we went to the front desk. The teen working the front ticket stand called the police, showed us and the cops the video footage of the man walking down the hall, and then we filed a police report. I'm just so grateful that my brother went to a different bathroom down the opposite direction of the hall, because if he had been in there, even with my showing up to save him, I have no idea what would have happened. It's been over a year now, and the man was never identified. Back in 2008, Cloverfield was one of the biggest movies of the year, and I desperately wanted to see it. Most of my friends had already gone to see it, which upset me given that I didn't want to be seen going to the movie theater alone. However, I didn't have work or school on Thursdays, so on Wednesday night, I figured I could get away with going alone to one of the small theaters nearby with a screening of the film at 9:30, since I knew it would be quiet. Well, I showed up, bought a ticket, and immediately realized the entire building was dead. I entered the theater, and much to my surprise, there was not a single person in there. There were 2 large sections of seats in the theater. I sat in the bottom row of the upper section, which was seated just behind a tiny wall. During the quiet parts of the movie, which were very few, I kept thinking that I was hearing something coming from behind me. It was almost like I was hearing a voice. Is someone there? Nothing. I felt like the sounds were just getting louder and closer, but I kept turning around and didn't see anyone. I felt like I was losing my mind. Eventually, the sounds became so loud that it was evident it was a crazed whispering. I was about to nope the fuck out of there, but when I got up and took one last look behind me, a figure popped up quickly from behind the seats just 2 rows up from me, arms flat to their sides and just facing me like a stiff statue. I ran like there was no tomorrow back to the lobby, where I saw nobody, not a single employee. I kept running to the car, took a few seconds to catch my breath once inside, and drove back home. I tried calling the theater that same night. I never got anyone to answer. I didn't bother the next day, and I just tried to let it go. It still freaks me out beyond imagination to this day. One of my first jobs was working at a movie theater in Huntington on Long Island. It was an okay gig for a 16-year-old. Dealing with the general public in Mass, you'll always run into creeps. However, there was one creep and one really weird situation that I still have nightmares about. It was a Monday, like 11 o'clock at night, and the last 2 playing movies were finishing up, which was earlier than usual. On weeknights, I would usually be out of there by midnight during the summer. Anyway, I was the only one working besides Kathy, the lady behind the popcorn counter who was closing up. I was sitting on the carpeted steps next to my ticket podium on my phone when Kathy yelled over to me to sweep the floors. She told me she was heading out and would be back within the hour to close up. I hurried up with the sweeping and sat back down to get back to playing a Tetris-like game on my flip phone. I was left alone a lot like this, and this was the one time during my shifts that I feared something such as a late-night robbery might easily take place. Suddenly, I heard the front door to the theater pull open with force. I stared down at the doorway to the lobby, which blocked the actual entrance section, waiting for someone to walk through, and hoping it would be Kathy. After all, she would have locked the doors anyway at this hour. I called out Kathy's name, and suddenly, an upper middle-aged man with a big brown faded jacket came wandering in, immediately locking his eyes onto mine. I told him we were closing up and he had to leave. He looked at me with a sort of intimidating Vincent Pastore kind of look on his face. He mumbled his words in his response, but I could make out his phrase to be, "Is Kathy here?" I shook my head no, and he mumbled, "I'm just gonna go sit down over there for a while." I was very against confrontations with other people, so my heart was racing, and I lacked the confidence to order him to leave. I sat back down on the step and pretended to be absorbed in my phone, when really I was texting Kathy telling her there was someone weird here for her. But with the old flip phones, texts took forever to send, and even longer for people to check. By the time the text was sent, I noticed the man, now across the room sitting on a bench, was literally watching me. I wanted to show him that I was annoyed by this, so I simply got up, walked up the 3 carpeted stairs, and sat down on the bench in front of a wall that would block my view from him. Stupid old me didn't figure this would allow him to do whatever he wanted not being within my vision. Within minutes, I realized this was dumb and went back to sitting on the step, only now the man was gone. Kathy returned around the same time that the last of the moviegoers were leaving. I told her about the guy, and she said she left the door unlocked by mistake. I spent about 10 minutes sweeping up in some of the auditorium rooms before my shift was officially over. Kathy wanted me to do one more favor before leaving. Bring the mop, bucket, and broom down into the storage den. I did as she asked, opened the door in the lobby which leads to the storage area, walked down the half-flight of concrete stairs with the mop, broom, and bucket, and stopped. Behind one of the boilers, I could see as clear as day an arm tucked away in the corner. It was the man, and he was very clearly trying to hide. I pretended like I didn't notice and walked back up the stairs. I locked the door behind me and ran to Kathy. She checked the camera footage first, and this is where things got disturbing. Within the period of time that I was hiding from the man, the surveillance cameras caught him getting up and leaving the theater. Kathy seemed surprised and declared, "That's my ex-husband." I felt like my heart was starting to drop as she said this, and I was starting to put things together. I assured her there was in fact somebody down there. She took out her cell phone and dialed not for 911, but rather for her ex-husband as she left the building. I followed her, afraid to stay in the theater alone. Kathy suddenly started to panic, as it seemed her ex-husband hung up the phone on her. She then called the cops, and what she explained to them shocked and disturbed me. When she hung up the phone, she was in a panic, and she tugged me away from the building. It turned out her ex-husband arrived to the theater to get her out of there, because he had apparently run into some trouble with a guy he knew who threatened to kill Kathy for whatever messed up reason. The cop cars pulled up into the parking lot with their sirens blaring. Minutes later, they came out with some old Italian mobster-looking guy in cuffs. Kathy never showed up for work after that, and I was never able to get the full backstory out from anyone. I was the coolest guy at the theater for a while since I witnessed all of this. I just really wish I got the full story though, because it really interested me. I never saw Kathy, her ex-husband, or that random guy who potentially almost killed me had I approached him ever again.
It was almost a decade ago. I was in the Adirondack Mountains for a hiking and skiing trip. I rented an Airbnb cabin for the week, kind of nestled in its own private section of woods, perfect for skiers and hikers. Though there was news of an incoming blizzard all of a sudden one day that week. I wasn't just going to cut my trip 3 days short though, and I already paid for it. I think it was a Friday, I don't remember, but I woke up that morning to knocks at the front door of my cabin. I looked out the window in my bedroom, and I was greeted with nothing but white sheets of snow covering everything, with heavy snow still piling on. I looked to the front door, and there was this woman in a parka who looked rather distressed. I quickly threw on a change of clothes and opened the door. She was some 40-something-year-old woman. Her cheeks were red, and she looked freezing. She asked, in I guess as polite way as possible, if she could seek shelter here until the storm blew over. I figured it was the gentleman thing to do. So I invited her in and told her to make herself comfortable while I heated up some coffee. She plopped herself down on the couch and asked if I lived here. I told her it was just an Airbnb, then asked where she was coming from. She said she also rented an Airbnb up here, but she got caught in the blizzard and couldn't find her way back. She said her name was Meredith. I handed her a cup of coffee, but she refused it and said she was really tired. Then she asked if she could just rest on the couch. I allowed it, though as I ate my breakfast. I can't lie, I felt really awkward. I didn't really know what to do after my breakfast. I didn't feel comfortable just hanging in the living room kitchen area, so I went back to my room to watch TV. The snow was really coming down outside, and the wind was so aggressive that the whistling shrieked through the windows. Not too long after, another knock at the door. I once again looked out the window. This time there was a man outside. I went to open the door, with Meredith now sitting up on the couch, asking who it was. I told her I don't know, then I opened the door. It was like deja vu because the man basically gave the same story, that he was caught in the blizzard and needed a place to stay. At this point, having already let Meredith in, I had to let him in too. I told him the same thing I told her, make yourself comfortable. He introduced himself as Mark. Meredith and Mark. They introduced themselves to each other as well, and they had a laugh at the fact that they were both in the same boat. Then they both kind of playfully praised me for letting them in. Meredith seemed more lively now, more open to conversation. So we talked about a bunch of random stuff until there was nothing really left to talk about. The day dragged on into the night. It grew dark and cold inside the cabin. The snow was showing no signs of receding. I offered them whatever food was in the fridge throughout the day. Unfortunately for me, it seemed it was approaching that time that I had to designate where they would be sleeping. But Meredith kind of did that for me. She asked if I would allow the two of them to stay here for the night. I had to say yes. So they both slept on the couches. I slept in my room, of course. I fell asleep rather easily, with the knowledge that my belongings were under my bed and couldn't be easily stolen by these two strangers. I'm usually a heavy sleeper, but this night I woke up to a loud thump. I sat up. The door to my bedroom was open, and the sound of the outside wind was incredibly loud. I discovered the front door to the cabin was open too, and neither Meredith nor Mark were on the couch. I went out to the porch for a second, just to look into the woods. There were fresh-looking footsteps leading into the snow, and I could see Meredith just standing out there in the snow, facing me, holding what looked to be my travel bag. I yelled at her to come back here, along with a few choice words. I ran to my room to get my boots. As I rushed to put the boots on while on the couch, I noticed my bedroom door was now shut. I 100% did not close that door. Was I about to open it? Hell no. Especially not after I heard footsteps on the other side of the door. I got my boots and coat on and ran to the front porch again. But now Meredith wasn't alone. Someone, a man, I couldn't tell if it was Mark or not, was standing next to her, holding her hand, and they were both facing the house. I didn't care about the bag anymore. I ran to my Jeep and drove through the 3 feet of snow. There had to be more than just those two people in the house that night, because someone else was in the bedroom. I was too nice. I let my guard down with two strangers, and I paid the price. I'm just happy they didn't kill me, though. Somehow I got the vibe they were trying to do more than just rob me of my bag. My older brother and I used to love to play out in the snow. We live by the woods. I'm not giving my town or state or any other details of our location, though. One night our parents let us go outside to play in the blizzard. We figured playing hide and seek would be fun since the footprints in the snow would create a new factor in the game. So I was the one hiding first. We were playing in the woods with flashlights. I turned mine off once I found a place to hide, just to not give away my location. I ducked down in the deep snow between two big trees. I tried covering my tracks in the snow, but I couldn't possibly get all of them. I saw my brother's flashlight in the distance, coming in my direction. He was definitely going to find me, so I ran in the dark deeper into the woods. I definitely lost him because I didn't see his light anymore, or maybe he turned it off. Also, we knew these woods, and I knew which direction I was going. I wasn't going to get lost. Eventually, as I kept walking though, I found another trail of footprints. They seemed like they were left there only a few minutes ago, so I started following them, expecting to find a deer at the end. As the footprints became more fresh, however, I started to realize they were boot prints, not animal footprints. This also meant I was getting closer to whoever just left these boot prints. I was thinking at first that it was my brother. Maybe he ran past me without me hearing it. I only thought that because I didn't see how or why anyone else would be out here in the middle of a blizzard. With my lights still on, I noticed something black sticking out of this big pile of snow, which seemed to sit right next to the boot marks. I stopped and examined it, and brushed some of the snow off the object. I brushed enough snow off to realize it was a big black garbage bag. This didn't look good. I already smelled something foul in there. Garbage? That's what I was hoping for. I tried to find the opening of the bag, and eventually just gave up and tore the bag open with my nails. I gagged the instant I saw what was inside. A decomposing human body. When I say gagged, I'm talking coughing loudly and uncontrollably in shock and disgust, and I think that gave away my position to my brother, because pretty soon his light started shining on me. I turned to him, his light in my face, and made a hand motion signaling for him to run, like go home. Rightfully so, he was confused and kept approaching me, so I ran to him and told him to turn off his flashlight. I pointed at the bag and whispered what was inside. He didn't believe me, even after I begged him to just go home with me. He went to the bag to see for himself, and when he saw I wasn't lying, he put his hand over his mouth. As the older brother, he started guiding me and nudging me back to the house, trying not to make a sound. Though, as we moved, we kept looking back, thinking we heard footsteps in the snow behind us. We moved faster every time. He had to keep the flashlight on, otherwise it would be pitch black. Then, I think at the same time, we both looked back after hearing a footstep again, and saw about 50 feet away or so, there was someone standing there, right in the light of my brother's flashlight, watching. From there, we ran all the way back home. The man yelled something at us, but neither of us could make out what he said. We got back to the house 2 minutes later and told our parents, who called the police to report the dead body. The police came and asked us a bunch of questions. Then they sent out a search team based on our description of the location. They didn't make us go back out there. The search turned up no results, but they resumed the next day in the daylight, which was when we were asked for assistance in retracing our steps. We did the best we could, but the body was never found. It wouldn't be much of a surprise if whoever was out there moved the body after realizing there were 2 witnesses. We were literally just little kids when this happened, and we were still being followed by possibly the person who hid that body there to begin with. I still wonder if we just narrowly escaped with our lives. It started on the night of the first snowstorm of the year. I was off the next day for work, so I was just relaxing in my bed watching a movie, drinking hot cocoa. All of a sudden, something hit my window that nearly gave me a heart attack. I looked at my window and saw the fresh mark of a snowball having just splattered over the glass. I opened the window to look outside, and I heard a kid's laughter. Well, that answered that. I closed the window again, and my attention shifted back to the movie. Not too long before, a second pow at the window, followed by the kid's laughter. This time I ignored it. I knew that by giving the kid a reaction, they would keep going. Apparently that worked, because no more snowballs were thrown at my window that night. The next night, though, it happened again, this time while I was asleep. I woke up to a much louder and more ferocious bang at the window from a snowball. I opened the window and took a look outside. Though it wasn't snowing anymore, I still couldn't see too far out onto the lawn, though I did hear the laughing of the kid again. It was a boy's laughter. It sounded like a 10-year-old. I yelled something out the window at him. I think it was a threat, but nothing too serious to be directed at a child. It didn't happen again that night. The next day, a lot of the snow had melted, but most of the ground was still covered in a white sheet. After turning off my light in my room, I lay awake, anticipating and dreading the sound of a snowball hitting the glass that would once again make me jump out of my skin. And just like clockwork, it happened. That goddamn kid was back. I was ready this time. I jumped out of bed and looked out the window. This time, I saw just for maybe half a second the back of a kid running away into the darkness. I threw on my shoes and coat and ran outside to find him. I found where his footsteps started at my window, and I followed them. I ran as fast as I could, trying to catch up to him. His footprints led me down a grass field until I reached a road. The footprints stopped at a big sycamore tree. Wrapped around it were 2 white bands of flowers. There was also a wooden cross planted in front of the tree. It was a memorial for a fatal car crash here. I double and then triple checked to see if the footsteps went any other direction, but they mysteriously stopped right there. I walked back home and went to bed, a bit disturbed. The next day I did some research and inquired with some locals, and I found out a mother and her son died in a car crash running into that tree. When I learned this, I got goosebumps, but I didn't want to find out how old the son was. I couldn't bring myself to do it. God forbid the son was around 10 years old. I'd forever be haunted by this, even more so than I already am. The next night, I thought I heard a child's laughter outside my window, but it may have just been my imagination running wild. I had to take sleeping pills for a whole month, just so that I wouldn't be awake terrified all night.
Craigslist is nowhere near what it used to be. It's been replaced by websites like Facebook Marketplace and Poshmark. Maybe a big reason for this stems from not just the rampant scams on the website, but also because it's the go-to site for a lot of creeps. So for old time's sake, here are 3 Craigslist ads with disturbing backstories. This was an ad posted in Kansas City a month ago that a viewer by the name of Christian sent in. It's a harmless looking ad for an old vacuum cleaner. This was posted in the for sale by owner section and listed as free. It was titled Free Dirt Devil Vision Bagless Canister. The ad description said, "I'm giving away this perfectly working Dirt Devil bagless vacuum cleaner. My wife and I got a new vacuum and no longer need this. First come, first serve. Will disclose address after communication." The listing left a phone number to contact, and so Christian replied to the ad, sending a text saying he's interested, and promptly got a response. The reply back was, "Hello, what is your name?" To which he replied, "Christian, what's yours?" They replied, "Jackie, nice to meet you. The vacuum is all yours. When can you come pick her up?" Christian replied back, "If you can hold it for me until tomorrow, I'd come then." They replied back, "Okay." So the next day, the seller sends a follow-up text, "Hello Christian, what time can you pick up the vacuum?" 8 o'clock if that works for you. What's the address? They replied back, "Sounds good to me. Give me a call. I'll explain how to get here." So at this point, Christian calls the number as directed and a man's voice answers the phone. Not the female voice he was expecting after the seller introduced themselves as Jackie. Christian asked if this were Jackie he was speaking with, and the man said no, that's his wife, and that she's not available right now. This was the first red flag for Christian, since it was the same number he was contacting the whole time, yet apparently both this man and his wife were using it, which would just seem a little unusual to anyone since no one really shares cell phones. The man on the phone introduced himself as Brock and explained how to get to the location. He gave Christian the cross streets to what he described as his warehouse, which he'd have to open the gate for. Christian had a pretty normal reaction, asking what he meant by warehouse, because he was expecting to be given a regular home address to pick up this relatively small item. Brock told Christian that he owned part of a small warehouse where he and his wife would store a lot of their old belongings and stuff they were going to sell. He claimed to be a wholesaler. Christian agreed to come to the specified location at 8 o'clock near Grandview, which is south of Kansas City. The specified cross streets led him to a quiet T intersection in an area with nothing but unmarked buildings that resembled warehouses. Christian parked his car and found the gate that he was told to meet Brock at. When he texted him that he was there, the gate started to roll open automatically, and beyond the gate was a long driveway between two different brick buildings leading into darkness. Christian called Brock, who rejected the call and texted Christian to come inside the gated area and inside the warehouse straight ahead. It was so dark ahead of him that he couldn't even see a warehouse. Christian asked Brock to bring the vacuum outside by the gate, and this is where the alleged Brock person stopped answering. After trying to call Brock's number multiple times, eventually the calls would go straight to voicemail, likely because Christian's number was blocked. So Christian hurried back to his car and rushed home. Upon checking on the ad once he got home, the listing was taken down. Doing a reverse phone lookup, he found that the number didn't come up on any phone book websites. By avoiding going beyond that gate and into the darkness and unknown ahead, he likely avoided something terrible. The following Craigslist ad was posted on May 24th of 2012. On the surface, it looks a little unusual, but like something you could expect to see on the casual encounters side of Craigslist. The poster of the ad said he was looking for a male who was interested in becoming an actor in a personal movie he was making. His requirements for the person included being between the age of 18 and 35 and good-looking, and including a face and body picture. He also stated he wasn't going to pay them anything, as the movie was strictly for his own pleasure. At the bottom, he states he's not looking for sex. The poster of this ad was Luca Rocco Magnotta, a notorious Canadian murderer who had a whole documentary made after him. The unfortunate soul who responded to this ad was 33-year-old Jun Lin. Luca spent a lot of time in mental hospitals growing up, and in 2002 he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He first attracted online attention when he started posting videos of cats. Not cute videos though. In 2010, a series of videos were posted online which showed Luca suffocating and drowning kittens. These were not his first crimes. He had already been convicted of fraud in 2004 after racking up $17,000 on a friend's credit card, and in 2005 he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman. The videos spawned outrage over the internet, and an online community of people formed to work together to try to find the man behind the videos. A tip led them to Luca, and around this time, Luca posted another video in which he fed a cat to a snake, and started hinting that his victims might shift to humans. Unfortunately, 33-year-old student Jun Lin was the one to have the misfortune of being Luca's first human victim. Jun was a lonely Concordia University student who didn't have many friends and had only been in Canada for a couple of years. Jun responded to Luca's ad, and they met that same night. Security footage captured them entering Luca's building, and that night, Jun sent a text to his ex that he would see in the morning, saying good morning. It would be his final text. The next day, Luca posted another video called One Lunatic, One Ice Pick. The video captured the savage murder of Jun Lin. In it, Luca stabbed Jun with an ice pick while he was tied up, before performing unspeakable acts and dismembering his body. A few days later, viewers of the video were attempting to report the crime to police, but the reports were dismissed by police because they believed the video was fake. By then, Luca had already started disposing of the body. CCTV footage captured him throwing bags into a bin while wearing Jun's t-shirt. On the 29th of May in Montreal, Mike Nadeau, who worked as a janitor, found a suitcase that had been sitting outside the apartment building he worked at for days. He ignored it until the suitcase started emitting a foul smell. Upon opening it, he found Jun's torso inside.
So the curiosity, I guess, got the best of us. We said, let's open this and see what's in there. So there was a small lock. We cut it. We opened up, and there was a torso with no head and just,
Lucas sent the rest of Jun's severed limbs to various different political parties and elementary schools. Eventually, police suspected that Luca had traveled to Europe, and this was confirmed when CCTV footage caught him in Germany. Authorities were able to arrest him in an internet cafe in Berlin on the 4th of June, where he was sitting reading articles about himself. In 2014, he was found guilty of first-degree murder, publishing obscene materials, committing an indignity on a body, and criminally harassing the Prime Minister, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Knowing all of this information makes this little Craigslist post that usually wouldn't bat much of an eye in the casual encounter section incredibly disturbing. This last one happened to a freshman girl in college who I'll refer to as Christina. Christina was strapped for cash and was looking to sell her prom dress and other dresses she no longer planned on using. So she made a listing on Craigslist with pictures of all the dresses, including 2 pictures of her wearing the prom dress. Christina left her number in the Craigslist ad to be contacted on, which for a young girl putting 2 pictures of her body on Craigslist of all websites wasn't a good idea. Not surprisingly, she got a phone call within the hour, and it was someone who claimed to take interest in the dresses. It was a man on the other end, who she says sounded anywhere from 35 to 55, with a slightly raspy voice. He said he was calling about the dresses she posted on Craigslist, to her surprise because she would obviously expect only females to call or text and inquire about the dresses. He explained that he was looking to buy the dresses for his girlfriend as a gift, and he wanted to know if they'd fit her, so Christina told him all the sizes and prices per dress. The man asked for more pictures of the dresses if possible, which she agreed to, so she kept him on the phone on speaker while she took more pictures of the dresses laid out on her bed. Mid-doing this, he started asking more questions that progressively got weirder, starting with how tall she was, how the dress fits up there, and what size bra she wears, to which Christina started feeling uncomfortable, mentioning to him that's not relevant. He apologized and said he just wanted to make sure it would be a good fit for his girlfriend. He then proceeded to ask if the dresses were tight on Christina, and she replied some of them are moderately tight. The next question was where Christina really started to question this man's intentions. He asked if there was any chance she could send him pictures with her wearing all of the dresses to get a better idea of if they'd fit his girlfriend. After a few seconds of silence because Christina didn't know what to say, the man on the other end asked if she used to wear panties under the dresses, followed by a short creepy chuckle, and then he said, "You have a really cute voice." Christina hung up the phone and blocked the number. She also took the ad down from Craigslist and didn't plan on listing it again on there. But she would later find out that he would start stalking her after a random account started following her on Instagram and requested her on Facebook. Both accounts had no pictures and the name Mike Allen. A quick lookup of the number that called her revealed the name Michael Allen on Google. This meant she was now dealing with a stalker situation, and it only got worse from there. When she blocked both accounts, she kept getting calls from a no caller ID number, and it only stopped when she set up silence unknown callers on her phone. But the stalking didn't end there. One night later, there was a running car with its lights off parked outside Christina's house. She noticed this before going out. She called to her dad to point it out as possibly being the guy who had been stalking her, and as soon as her dad stepped outside, the car drove away with its headlights still off. At this point, Christina's dad sent a threatening text to the man's number, and then tried calling multiple times to no avail, to end up leaving a loud voicemail. It seemed to do the trick, as the stalking stopped as far as they know, and hopefully that's the case for good. Christina was smart in how she handled this, hanging up and blocking the number as soon as the man made creepy comments, and blocking his social media accounts. Unfortunately, there's not much to do once someone has your number if they want to stalk you, as a lot of your information can be found just through that. That's why it's best that if by some chance you still use Craigslist, don't use your real phone number.
A long time ago, I very briefly lived with my good friend Ben on a quiet street in Northville, Michigan, perhaps notable for being close to Detroit. It wasn't the nicest house, or block, or area for that matter, but the price was unbeatable for two broke young men like ourselves. Ben and I went way back to when we were like 9 years old, and at the time of this story, we worked the same job, and rooming together with him seemed like a great idea. On our first day there, we quickly figured out that the creepy-looking house across the street with the overgrown grass and bushes was abandoned, as were a lot of the houses around the area. In fact, something we somehow hadn't noticed before, there was even graffiti next to one of the front windows and on the fence. Our neighbors on one side seemed like creeps, and we didn't even want to approach them. The neighbor on the other side was an older dude, a very interesting hippie-ish kind of guy. His name was Marv. He had long gray hair with a matching long gray beard. He seemed friendly at first, I guess, but also very weird and hard to talk to. We spoke with him on our second day there after work. He told us the place had been abandoned for as long as he could remember. That night, with the sun almost set, while we were sitting on the front stoop smoking, I looked to the house across the street and felt a little tingle in my stomach out of shock. I stood up, threw my cigarette onto the floor and crushed it. Ben looked at me confused, and I pointed to the window across the street. I was pointing at a face, which I saw staring at me through the lone upstairs window of the house. "Do you see that? There's someone at that window." Ben looks at the window immediately, but I saw the person move their head away before he could see it. It's weird. I explained to Ben that I didn't even know if it was a male or female, old or young. The glass was just too foggy. All I knew was that I saw the eyes, and they were staring at us. Ben told me I was legitimately creeping him out. He believed me. We ran over to Marv's house to tell him, but strangely he didn't answer his door, even though we saw him watching TV in his tiny, messy living room through the window. The fact that the guy wouldn't answer creeped us out even more. Dude, what the fuck is going on with this place? Ben laughed, but the situation couldn't stay comical for long. Ben owned a katana. He brought it to mention and suggested we go across the street with it, break into the house from the backyard, and see what was going on. We were always adventurous, daring troublemakers as kids, so this was our natural response to the situation. When it got dark, we went across the street to the backyard, broke off the board holding the back door shut, and entered the house. We both had heavy-duty flashlights with us to light up basically any room we were in. The house was dusty, decrepit, but surprisingly seemed to remain untouched from the inside. No graffiti or signs of vandalism anywhere. Still, the place was disturbingly creepy, and we immediately joked that we should get the fuck out of there, but we pressed on. The first floor was pathetically small like our own, a kitchen, a tiny living room, and a dining room. There was no basement and one closet. The first floor was clear. We both agreed to check the upstairs. We tiptoed over to the stairs, and Ben, out of nowhere, screamed, "Is anybody up there?" "Dude, why the fuck would you do that?" I said quietly. Then we both froze in fear when we heard rapid stomping suddenly appear from above us. It was someone heavy, and it sounded like they were running over to the stairway. I literally felt like my heart stopped. Ben, the one with the katana, was the first to flee, grabbing my arm and tugging me with him. We went out the way we entered and ran back to the house, where we saw Marv just standing by his window, watching us. We didn't know what to do. He just intently stared at us as we froze to catch our breath in front of the house. We went inside, decided not to call the police, and moved out literally the next day. We explained to the landlord that the location was just too inconvenient for us, and we needed to leave ASAP. We drove away from that house and never looked back. Alright, so there are a couple of abandoned dorms on my college campus. They were shut down like 15 years ago because of... Actually, I don't really know why. Anyway, they're abandoned. It's rumored that they'll be renovated at some point, but that'll probably never happen. Naturally, it's also rumored that they're haunted. The school has the windows boarded up to prevent students from going in there. Because I fancy myself an urban explorer who isn't afraid of getting into any trouble, I decided about a week ago that I was going to break in and take a look around. Cut to last night. I didn't really have a plan per se, other than wear black and avoid getting caught. Security on campus has been tightened recently, but I didn't have any issues getting in unseen. I'll spare you the details, but basically, you'd be surprised what you could do with a crowbar and some vandalism. I ended up crawling in through a first floor window. I found myself in an empty dorm room, illuminated only by my phone's flashlight. Now, one of the rumors is that the basement is haunted, so that's where I decided to go first. At the time, I thought I was some ballsy explorer, but I can't even express how thoroughly scared shitless I was. This building was dark, old, and smelled weird, and I thought that at any moment, something would come around the corner and tear me apart. It didn't help that my phone battery was being sucked dry by the flashlight app, so I was forced to use it very conservatively. Foresight is not my forte. Anyway, the basement. There wasn't any alleged faceless man ghost, or at least not that I saw. But this is where shit starts to get weird. Let me just set the scene. I very carefully descend the stairs. I open the door at the bottom and step into, well, a room. A completely normal room, although a little colder and with a stickier floor than I would have preferred, but otherwise completely normal. I swept my flashlight across the opposite wall, and there was another door. Probably just a laundry room, I thought. I'll go in there and take a look around and then get out of here before I piss myself. And then I could brag to my friends that I explored the basement of one of the abandoned dorms. But it wasn't the laundry room. I opened the door to a sea of red on the floor. There was a drain in the middle of the room, but it seemed to be clogged with various organic materials. Shiny, red organic materials. I caught a glimpse of a black pentagon-like thing on the ceiling. And then I fucking ran, up the stairs, down the hall, and out of the window I busted earlier. I didn't stop running until I got back to my dorm. I laid in bed, wide awake, absolutely terrified. I managed to fall asleep sometime after my roommate left for class. I got up around 11 o'clock. I found a piece of paper that had been slipped under the door. Did you like what you saw? It was written in bright red ink. It's gotta be someone just fucking with me. But damn, they're good at it, because this legitimately creeped me out. I'm 16 years old and currently live next to a vacant house. Barely even a vacant house, more like abandoned. I never knew why the town never made an effort to fix it up and sell it. That never really bothered me though. Not until after a recent disturbing event. My bedroom faces the neighboring house in question, and sometimes on hot nights when I had the window open, I would feel like I could hear voices or moaning type noises coming from the neighboring house. Sometimes I even wondered if those sounds were teens sneaking into the house and having sex. But one night, that changed. It was a Thursday night in July. I was on my bed playing video games home alone when I muted the TV, thinking I heard something from outside. I went to my window and literally gasped when I heard a brief scream coming from inside the abandoned house. It wasn't drawn out at all, it only lasted about maybe a second, and I could just barely hear it. My adrenaline was rushing now. I wanted to get closer immediately. I shut off the lights and TV, took my airsoft gun as a mock weapon, and hopped the backyard fence over to the abandoned house's backyard. I knew the back door was left unlocked since I had been in there before with friends. I simply opened the back sliding door quietly and crept inside just a bit to listen for any more sounds. There was a weird, steady, creaking type noise. It was very low, but it was evident. It was also as dark as it could get in there. I flicked on the light attachment on my airsoft gun and aimed it in front of me, actually feeling pretty cool for a moment. I now stepped fully into the house, and the sound grew louder. I scanned the living room, completely empty, as were the other rooms on this floor. I crept over to the basement door, which was open. The sound was coming from down there. I felt my heart begin to race, and my gut instinct was telling me to turn around and leave now. But I guess my teen boy adrenaline and curiosity got the better of me. I took one step at a time down the stairway as the creaking sound got louder, and when the opening to the basement finally became visible, I aimed the gun light around the room. I froze when the light landed on something that was moving. It was a rocking chair. I got a serious pain in my stomach when I saw the back of somebody's head sitting in the rocking chair. When the light landed on them, the chair stopped rocking. I ran up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, ran outside, slammed the back door shut, and locked my front and back door after getting back inside. I went to my room and stood at the window, watching the house. I then picked up the phone and called my dad. He seemed more surprised than concerned when I told him, confirming that nobody lives there. He calmly told me to get the police over there to check it out. When I hung up the phone, I looked out the window again, and right across from me, on the same level, there was somebody standing at the upstairs window of the abandoned house with the window open. I shut the blinds and called the police. They told me to keep watch through my window, and when I lifted the blinds back up, he was gone. I just hoped he was still in the house by the time the cops showed up. But of course, just my luck, the house was devoid of any people or furniture. Well, except for one thing, a single wooden rocking chair in the otherwise empty basement.
September 24th, 1971 was the last day at the time 16-year-old Kathy Marie Moulton was seen. Kathy planned to attend a dance during that night in her hometown of Portland, Maine. She asked her father to drop her off on Cumberland Avenue that evening. Kathy wanted to purchase a pair of pantyhose and some toothpaste before preparing for the dance. She stopped by a music store on Forest Avenue later in the day to visit a friend. She told her friend she would see her at the dance that evening, and then said she was going to walk home, which was about 1.5 miles away. She was last seen walking down Forest Avenue after leaving the music store, and she was seen carrying a brown leather Mexican clutch purse, which contained her house key, 2 tubes of toothpaste, and a very small amount of cash. When she didn't arrive home by dinner time, her parents knew something was wrong and reported her missing. Kathy was seen in a stolen blue Cadillac with her friend named Lester Everett, though it is possible that Kathy willingly left with him. There were reported sightings of Kathy, Lester, and another young man in a remote area of Aroostook County a few weeks after her disappearance. The second young man was Ronald Reed Purley. However, Lester was eventually found alone, and he claimed to not know where Kathy was. A garage employee at Fort Fairfield in Aroostook County remembered seeing Kathy, Lester, and Ronald. They came to the garage to buy new tires for the Cadillac. The employees said Ronald appeared to be controlling Kathy's movements, even walking her to and from the bathroom with his hand on the back of her neck. Across the border on the Tobique Reserve, witnesses said they saw Lester and Kathy for a few days in September 1971, before the two went to a farm in the Mars Hill area of Aroostook County where they started working on a potato field at McBride's farm. Kathy was completely distrusting of Lester and continually begged to go back home to Portland, which he refused. Kathy befriended a teenage girl who worked on the fields. The girl said Kathy was nervous about her parents being upset with her, and that they were probably looking for her. According to the girl, Kathy also cried often and seemed fearful of the other men working on the farm, and she often said she wanted to go home. Lester became tired of Kathy's constant complaining to go home, so on the evening of September 29, 1971, while the other field workers were enjoying a bonfire, Lester got behind the wheel of the stolen car with Kathy in the passenger seat, and he told her that they were going for a ride. She begged him to drive her back home, but he didn't. Lester returned the next morning and said that he had dropped her off at another camp, when in reality, he had brought her back across the Canadian border to the Tobique Reserve and left her with Ronald. At the end of the potato harvest, Lester and a few others left for Florida to pick oranges. He never returned to Maine, and when questioned, he said he did not know what happened to Kathy. Lester died of cancer in the mid-1980s, at the age of 35. Ronald, who had served time for rape and home invasion, has long been a prime suspect in this investigation. He has refused to cooperate with police, even when he was offered immunity from prosecution if he would provide details as to what happened to Kathy. Investigators have considered the possibility that Kathy was killed by Lester and that he left her body in the woods of Aroostook County, but this theory is unlikely since some of Ronald's relatives would later verify the fact that Lester had dropped her off at their home, and they would claim that one of their relatives had harmed her. It's unknown if this is what happened. His family has refused to cooperate with police about Kathy as well. Investigators believe she died on the Tobique Reserve sometime before Thanksgiving of 1971, but they never had enough evidence to file charges against anybody, or even get warrants to search Ronald's family home. In 1983, a hunter said he came across a skeleton in the woods near Smyrna, Maine, surrounded by female clothing. Some investigators believe the remains were Kathy's. The hunter was unable to retrace his footsteps and lead police back to the site, however, and the bones were never seen again. Kathy was a junior at Deering High School at the time of her disappearance, and her peers said she seemed like a happy girl with no reason to run away from home. Her father died in 2017, but her mother is still alive and continues to hope for a resolution in her case. Mary Virginia Carpenter was a 21-year-old girl from Texarkana, Texas, who went missing in Denton in the summer of 1948. She was last seen by a taxi driver around 9:30 p.m. on Tuesday, June 1st, 1948. She left her home in Texarkana and took a train to Denton, 6 hours away. At the station, she took a taxi to the Texas Women's University, where she was planning to complete a summer term. She transferred from the University of Arkansas after she decided she wanted to enter a different career field. Mary first enrolled in the Texas Women's University during the 1945 to 1946 school year, and then took a break from school to help her mother who had fallen ill and to save money. Mary once again enrolled in the school for the 1948 summer term, where she planned to begin training as a laboratory technician in the autumn, but she disappeared just before the summer term began. The cab driver who had seen her last, Edgar Ray Zachary, later stated he stopped in front of Brackenridge Hall, a building on campus, at 9 p.m., and Mary gave him a ticket for her trunk and paid him $1 so he would pick it up for her from the train station the next day. Edgar stated that after she got out of the taxi, Mary approached two young men standing near a yellow convertible that he believed to be a Pontiac. Edgar stated that one of the men were tall and the other one was chunky. Mary approached the men as if she knew them and began to speak to them, and Edgar, assuming they were just her friends, drove away. She never checked into her dorm in Brackenridge Hall and was never seen or heard from again after this moment. Some of Mary's former boyfriends stated she became infatuated easily and speculated that she ran away with a lover, but her family did not believe that she would leave without telling them, as Mary was very close with her family and it would just be completely out of character. She had previously been engaged, but broke off the relationship just weeks prior to the wedding. Police zeroed in on her boyfriend Kenny Branham and the cab driver Edgar. Kenny passed the polygraph tests and insisted that Mary would have no reason to run away. She didn't have a lover coaxing her to run off, no jealous exes, no wishes to leave her life behind. Kenny was also the first to report Mary missing to her mother, making his involvement unlikely. On top of that, Mary was looking forward to starting her semester at college. This led investigators to conclude that she had been taken. Police shifted their attention to Edgar and learned he had a record for petty crimes and a reputation for being abusive. He was charged with attempted rape in 1957, but the charge was dropped after the victim asked authorities not to prosecute. Edgar's wife stated he had been home with her from 10 p.m. onwards on the day Mary disappeared, but 10 years after her disappearance, his wife told police she lied to them, and her husband had not actually arrived home until 2 or 3 a.m. that night. Edgar died in 1984. He was never charged in connection with Mary's case, but he remains a suspect, although he did pass 2 polygraph tests in her case. In the winter and spring of 1946, 5 people were murdered in Lovers Lanes in Mary's hometown of Texarkana. Lovers Lane is a secluded area where people kiss or engage in sexual activity in their vehicles. This meant all 5 victims were young, around Mary's age. The crimes are believed to have all been committed by the same person. The murderer was never caught and became known as the Texarkana Phantom Killer. Mary was actually well acquainted with 3 of the killer's victims, creating suspicion that her case was linked with these murders, but police found no evidence to support this theory. In 1998, police received a tip that 2 men had raped and killed Mary shortly after her disappearance and buried her body in a dam at a stock tank near the Texas Women's University campus. The suspects were both deceased by this time, however. Police investigated this dam based on the information, but uncovered no evidence. Numerous leads and possible sightings of Mary have surfaced throughout the decades, but no solid evidence has been uncovered. Both of Mary's parents have passed away, and she was an only child, but her 3 cousins still hope to find closure in this case one day. Like Mary, Army veteran Alvin Matlock was also 21 years old at the time that he went missing in the spring of 1951. There were a lot of theories as to what happened to him, but none of them were pleasant. Alvin was last seen in Spokane, Washington, and at the time of his disappearance, he lived in a cabin on Browns Mountain in Spokane County. His little brother Clyde, who was 12 years old when Alvin disappeared, is now 83, and to this day still hopes his brother's body is found. Clyde and his wife Patricia went to the inaugural missing person event hosted by the Spokane County Medical Examiner's Office in 2016. At this event, which was held to help facilitate locating missing people, attendees could file police reports, submit DNA and dental records, and provide photographs of loved ones. Alvin had spoken to family members in March and informed them of his cabin's location. As far as his disappearance, his family first suspected something wasn't right when Alvin didn't show up to the family dinner on Thanksgiving Day 1951. His worried mother drove to his cabin on Brown Mountain to find the cabin empty and both of his vehicles gone. The family was told by a neighbor that he had quietly packed up and gone to Alaska. Clyde and other family members believed this for a while, mostly because they wanted to. But as the years passed and there was no contact from Alvin, it became clear he was not in Alaska. The story going around was that Alvin was having an affair with a married woman and had got into a fight with the woman's husband when he found out about what was going on. Some people believe that the woman shot Alvin during the scuffle, with reports from alleged neighbors saying they heard his cries for help and that the couple just likely let him die, but there was no body ever found. Police investigated these claims, but with no body, they couldn't make any arrests. There are no records of Alvin ever having lived in Alaska. However, according to family, Alvin was a loner and a big outdoorsman, and him moving to Alaska wouldn't be that far-fetched, especially since life in Alaska wouldn't really be that far off from the lifestyle that he was living in his cabin on Browns Mountain. Still, with no records of Alvin living in Alaska, and the complete cease of contact from Alvin's end, it still just doesn't add up, and some suspicion was also placed on the neighbor, who reported that he moved to Alaska. Patricia Matlock had done some detective work of her own, trying to find new leads and track down possible witnesses, but it was all to no avail. During the missing person event back in 2016, all Clyde could do was hand over some photographs of his brother and provide his DNA, in the hopes that someday, his brother's remains would be found and identified. If you ever check your spam folder in your email, there's a chance at one point you received an email with one of your passwords in the title, and inside the email would be threats of leaking your information or worse unless you paid a certain ransom, usually in Bitcoin. This usually happens when a hacker, or even often a regular user, will likely find this info by merely searching any of the numerous data breach databases available on criminal forums. In March of 2019, a 25-year-old man named Joe Albanese received a similar email to what was just described. It was titled his password that he used for every account that he had. This was obviously a cause for alarm, so he opened it immediately to read the contents of the email. This is what it said. "Hey Joe, all you really need to know is that I know your password and other personal information. I won't come after you, I won't harm you, as long as you send me a small amount of money, $5,000 in the form of Bitcoin. We're going to refer to it as a donation for a good cause, not as any kind of blackmail. My Bitcoin address is... If you don't send me the money, bad things may happen. Don't even bother going to the police. This email is untraceable." Joe did some research and learned that these kinds of threatening emails are common scams, and usually nothing will come of them. Still, Joe replied to the email asking, "What other personal information of mine do you currently possess? I'd love to know." He sent this as a sort of challenge to the email, not even really expecting a response or for it to even go through. But it did, and he promptly received a response back saying, "I know your home address is F. If you go to the police, I will know about it and you will be sorry." This is when worry would really set in with just about anyone, as having a password leaked in a data breach is one thing, but some unknown person having your home address threatening you with it is completely next level. Joe didn't reply to the email for several days, but he also didn't go to the police. He decided to wait it out and see what would happen next, and after 3 days, there was a follow-up email saying, "I'm still waiting for the payment. I won't wait much longer." Joe replied this time saying, "I'm not paying you $5,000. If you want to come to my house, you'll get a face full of lead." This was a complete bluff though, as he doesn't actually own a gun, and the hacker likely knew that, because that same night, Joe received a follow-up email containing a picture of his house. It was the side of his parents' house and zoomed in on his bedroom window upstairs. He didn't want to tell his parents in fear of worrying them, but now that his gun bluff didn't work, he knew he may have to get them or the police involved. He responded one more time saying, "I don't have $5,000. I'm broke paying off student loans. The house you sent a picture of is my parents' house. They did nothing wrong. If you need to do this, please do it to someone else. I don't have the money to send you even if I wanted to." There was no response this time, but within an hour, the sound of glass shattering from downstairs traveled throughout the house, and everyone, including his parents, heard it. There was one of their decorative bricks from the front of the house, laying in the dining room among thousands of tiny shards of glass from the broken window. Joe tried to explain the situation as quickly as he could, and while he and his dad took a quick look outside for anyone who could be out there, his mother called the police. Joe showed the police officers the emails and everything, which were forwarded to the police department. A police officer stayed parked outside the Albanese house for a couple hours that night. Joe blocked the email address from sending any further emails, and as far as he knew, he was never contacted again. The police had a hard time tracing back the original source of the email, as it was sent from an untraceable device, likely an iPod Touch or similar device. At some point, everyone imagines being famous in their lives. A lot of people create this image in their head that being in the public eye creates for nothing but a fairy tale life. But that's far from the truth. Being under the spotlight in any capacity comes with a lot of drawbacks, one of which being stalkers and overly obsessed fans. One extreme case of this: an ex-radio host and DJ who was centered in Los Angeles had a long, seemingly never-ending chain of emails from an obsessed fan. It started around 2005 or 2006 when the DJ started noticing a regular listener, someone who listened to the show every day and would call in on the request line from time to time. At one point, the listener won a prize from the show, and in order to deliver the prize, the DJ requested her email, and that's where things began. In order to be polite and cordial with the girl, he would answer all of her emails, and when Facebook started to become popular, he added her back where she commonly liked and commented on his posts. This went on for a while, until one day the fan professed her love for him. The DJ rejected this advance in the most polite way he could. She seemingly accepted the rejection, and the DJ thought it would be the end of it, but it wasn't. In 2011, she emailed him a link to a blog that she was writing, where she would post about him and their quote-unquote love multiple times per day. She followed him over to a new radio station and was religiously listening to his shows, assigning meaning to the musical playlist. For example, the song "Marry Me" by Train was popular at the time, and whenever that song would play on his show, she would blog about it actually being a marriage proposal from the DJ. She began saving all his photos from his social media and photos of other women in his life, like friends and girlfriends, and posting them to her blog with extremely hateful words. She'd make posts raging about him being a man whore, followed by another post not even 10 minutes later in a completely different tone, apologetic and soft, implying she may have bipolar tendencies. The DJ did his best to ignore it, even though by this point he was extremely creeped out, but as she again began emailing him, he tried more forcefully this time to get her to stop, but she wouldn't stop. The DJ started sending DMCA requests to her blog host from the photos of his that she had posted. The repeated violations got her blog shut down, but then she started emailing him instead of posting blogs. He made a filter folder so he never would have to see them aside from occasionally peeking at the insanity in the folder from time to time, just out of curiosity. Years went by and he hadn't answered any of her emails after 2 of them when he very adamantly told her to stop all communications and leave him alone. This continued for years, and in total she has sent him over 4,000 emails, all of which he's archived. This is a picture of just a select few of them. The more recent emails have gotten very dark and violent in tone. In one of the most recent ones, she was threatening to find and hurt the DJ and happily go to jail for it. In another one, she listed the specific neighborhood in which he lived, which he worries she may have his address if she already knew what town he lives in. In an effort to stem the flow of information, he deleted all of his social media accounts a while back, but she would still email him pictures he appeared in from his friends who had public profiles, as well as radio station photos that he appeared in. Most disturbingly, she sent the DJ photos of a shrine she had made of him in her home, with framed photos of his social media that she had posted up on the walls, desks, etc. Being a DJ, his appearance schedule must remain public, so she could technically find him working at nightclubs anytime she wants to, and understandably he's freaked out and worried about his safety. After calling multiple attorneys, none seemed very interested in helping him with this matter. Due to his fear of facing the girl in real life or even being in the same room as her, he never went through with filing a restraining order. He also worried that on the off chance she didn't have his home address, the legal process would reveal it to her. To my knowledge, there was never any follow-up with this, and it's not known if the harassment continued or what route the DJ pursued, if any. But this is one of those extreme cases of how a fan's obsession could have a very negative effect on someone's well-being and mental health. In this last one, a viewer who wanted to be referred to as Christian received multiple emails that he wanted me to share in a story video. Christian has a friend named Katie who was out for a job interview. They used to be co-workers, which is how they met. Nothing was out of the ordinary until Christian started to try and contact Katie after her interview was supposed to be done, only to find that his texts weren't delivering and calls were going straight to voicemail. It was very possible that her phone could have been off or she had no cell service, but as hours passed and still nothing was delivering, he started to get concerned. The most likely and obvious possibility was that she lost or broke her phone, but finally, hours later, the text said delivered. However, Kate never replied. That same day, as Christian was checking his email, he saw an email from Katie's old work email. He opened it, and it read, "Hey, I lost my phone and keys. Can you come pick me up? I'm by some old warehouse construction looking building in the parking lot across from a Hyatt place." Christian asked when she last had her phone and if she had any idea how she lost it. She replied, "I have no idea. Just come soon, please. It's cold." The address that she then sent to better help Christian get to her said it was 20 minutes away. But looking at the location of the address on the map, it led to some abandoned-looking warehouse parking lot, evident by the green growing in the parking lot and decaying-looking rooftop. Christian sent another email back, demanding she go to a less sketchy pickup point. She took a few minutes to answer back with, "I'm already sitting on a bench here. I'm comfortable, just please hurry." Christian got in his car and started following the directions to the location he was told to go. But about halfway there, he stopped the car when he had a thought. And that was, how is she using her laptop to email him in the middle of some random parking lot by an abandoned warehouse? While it was maybe possible that there was some free Optimum Wi-Fi nearby or something, it did seem very unlikely. This is where Christian became suspicious of the whole thing, and the fact that she was using her laptop to contact him instead of going to the hotel across the street and calling him just made it seem more suspicious. He tried calling her number a few times, and now it was ringing instead of going to voicemail. On his third try, the phone rang twice and somebody picked up for a second, though most likely on accident. By this point, Christian was suspicious all of Katie's things were stolen. He called Katie's brother to tell him about the situation and ask his opinion, but when he asked first thing, "Have you heard from Katie?" Katie's brother said she had been home for 2 hours, and that her entire backpack and phone were stolen. Christian yelled into the phone that he was being led into some sketchy parking lot at that very moment by someone who was on Katie's email, most likely on her laptop. Christian drove to Katie's house immediately to pick the two of them up, and they called her phone and left a voicemail with all 3 of them yelling threats of what they'd do if they didn't return the phone and laptop, which probably went unheard if the thief didn't have her passcode. They also sent a number of texts which went unresponded to. After calling the police and requesting assistance in the parking lot, a police car did show up, but the entire parking lot was abandoned as expected, and no further emails were received. Kate's phone was never turned on again. It was likely disposed of. She never got any of her stuff back, but on the bright side, Christian may have avoided being lured into some kind of trap that would have led to him being robbed or harmed.
It was July 4th, 2007. I was 16 years old, and I had nothing to do for the night. My older sister Alicia, who has 9 years on me, was going to some huge party upstate. I think it was referred to as the Rockaway Bomb Show, where a bunch of young, out-of-college adults would go to drink and go crazy. Surprisingly, when I told my sister that I had no plans, she invited me to come with her and her boyfriend Alex. Now, I was a shy kid, so maybe that's why she was inviting me, to help me break out of my shell. But being 16 years old, it was definitely out of my comfort zone to go attend some crazy drinking party full of 20-year-olds. Somehow though, she guilted me into going. We'd have to stay at a motel overnight there, so I packed my stuff, and within 2 hours, Alicia was honking the horn outside. It was a long drive, close to 4 hours. By the time we arrived, the sky was already turning that bright orange as the sun was setting. We pulled into some sketchy looking road with a sign that said "Fireworks Show This Way." I rolled down the window and already heard a huge crowd of people in the distance. As we passed the tree lines on either side into the clearing, we could see a transportable stage, a bunch of tables scattered everywhere, and a food and drink bar. People in their low 20s everywhere, all holding beers or other alcoholic beverages. I felt my heart sink a little in social nervousness. Alicia parked the car on the grass, because really there was no parking lot and the parking was basically a free-for-all. I followed Alicia and Alex to the party, and they immediately coincidentally found some of their friends who already seemed drunk. They introduced me and we chatted for a bit. Alicia handed me a beer, which I nervously accepted. As soon as I took the first sip, I started getting weird stares from people. I was afraid someone would ask me how old I am. I continued to cling on to Alicia and Alex for another 15 minutes before they both split up and started talking to random people. At that moment, I felt alone and awkward. In the middle of hundreds of college students and graduates all conversing with each other, and here I was, an awkward middle school looking 16-year-old with a beer in his hands all alone. A hand grabbed my shoulder and I turned, thinking it was Alex or Alicia, but it was rather some older guy. I mean, like out of place old. The guy was like in his 40s or 50s, he had a balding head and glasses, he looked like he could be a creepy priest. He then took the beer out of my hand and said, "How old are you?" That hit me hard in the stomach as I choked up for words. I was actually just getting that from my sister. He put the beer on a nearby table and asked me what my name is. I, still thinking this guy was a worker at the show or something, told him Jake. Then he asked me who I'm here with, and I responded, "My sister, like I just told you." Eventually, I talked my way away from the guy and looked for Alicia or Alex. There were so many people here though, and I didn't have a cell phone back then, so I couldn't even text or call them. It got to a point where I felt so alone and awkward that I wandered away from the party and into the woods. I sat on a log reflecting on myself and regretting my decision to come when all of a sudden I heard a huge boom followed by a roar of cheering. The fireworks show had started. I could actually see perfectly fine from where I was sitting, so I decided I'd just stay there. My mind was sucked into the beauty of the fireworks blowing up in the sky. So much so that I forgot about how upset I was. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. Something was wrapped around my mouth and nose. I struggled. I tried to scream and break free. I felt like I was becoming lightheaded. I looked up for anything on the ground to use as a weapon and pulled up a big stick. I tried swinging at the person's leg, but it didn't work. The person pulled me down to the ground and pinned me on my stomach. As a final attempt, I grabbed a big stone from in front of me, and with a single, lucky swing, I struck the person straight in the face. They let loose their grip and let out a grunt, giving me enough time to get up and run. I did take one glance at the person, however, and could see that they were wearing the same thing that the man I saw earlier had been. I ran back to the party where they were shooting off the fireworks and asked the apparent hosts of the party if they knew the man. They said they hadn't. I told them what happens, and one of the guys was like, "Holy shit, buddy, yeah, we're gonna report this." By the end of the night, when my sister and her boyfriend were too drunk to drive, I ended up driving to the motel. I never told anyone in my family about the incident out of embarrassment, but that's something I kind of regret now. My name is Ivan, I'm 15 years old, and this is the scariest experience of my life. So it's the 4th of July, 2015. I live in a calm suburban neighborhood that's usually very quiet, but one night it all changed. My dad had to work extra late since he was covering someone's shift, and my mom was at some friend's house party. This was a Friday night, so I would usually just play games on my computer and talk with friends, basically having my kind of fun. I would do that every single Friday night without any issues. The time was about 9 or 10 p.m. and I was playing my favorite game, League of Legends, talking with some friends, when suddenly I heard a window shut. Or maybe it was something else. I thought it may be the broken dishwasher we had that sounded very loud. I ignored it and wanted to get back to my game, so I increased the volume on my headset. The sound echoed so loud that I could almost hear it with the volume on 96%. I had enough and wanted to see what it was, so I reduced the volume and told my friends to hold on and that I would be right back. The sound wasn't from the dishwasher or the dryer. It wasn't a window either. The sound was still underway though when I came to look what it was. The basement. I had never gone in there since we moved in, and my parents told me to never go down there by myself. Not for suspense reasons or anything like that, but they actually just don't want me going down there moving around any boxes. The basement was dirty, and the door was kind of broken and always gave out creepy drafts when it was open. I went to the basement door and listened. The sound went on for a good 2 minutes before silence. My whole body was actually filled with joy and happiness. But before I could even breathe out and go to my room calmly, the sound started again. First quietly, and then louder and louder and louder. I was completely home alone if you're wondering. No parents, no pets, no babysitters, nothing. I didn't even have any weapons to defend myself either. I was so scared that I started having thoughts about my entire life as if it were flashing before my eyes, so completely sure I was going to pass out or even die. Now the sound was very loud. I went straight to my room and closed and locked the door very quietly. I took my phone and dialed my mom's number. She told me to call the police, which suddenly seemed like a better idea. I called the police, and as I was on the line with the operator, I heard a door opening from all the way downstairs. Because it was so loud, I knew that it was the basement door. The operator told me that they would be over as soon as they could. It was at that moment that the horrific truth hit me. Somebody was in my house. I listened in silence for a few minutes, other than the occasional firework booming in the distance from the outside, as I heard somebody rummaging through our kitchen and living room. I wrote to my friends in the chat, "There's a fucking intruder in my house." Before I could even see what they responded with, I heard footsteps coming upstairs. Thinking on my feet, I opened the window and jumped down 2 stories onto the grass, breaking my left ankle. I was crawling as far as I could away from the window, and when I looked up to the window, I saw him. The most disturbing face which has ever belonged to a man. A crooked mouth, brown, wiry hair, and eyes so dark I couldn't even see them. But I could only see it for a few moments before he turned and walked away from the window. The sounds of cop cars stopping nearby was the greatest thing ever at that moment. I remember watching the police walking the man out to the car in cuffs, and I'll never forget that face, which looked even more horrific up close as he gave me an evil, hateful stare before being driven off in the backseat of that police car. It was the 4th of July, 2 days after my birthday. We live in a very quiet town in New Jersey, so not much was going on. I had just turned 21, so my girlfriend, who had already been 21 for a while, jokingly decided to come over to my house with a couple six-packs and some fireworks for the holiday. My parents were at one of the neighbors' parties far down the road. We don't have a lot of close-by neighbors. My girlfriend's name is Sophia. When she arrived, we headed to the backyard, where we started drinking the six-packs together. She brought 2 big firework missiles, a couple bottle rockets, and some firecrackers. Obviously, the missiles were what caught my eye the most. When I finished my second beer, I got off the deck to shoot off the 2 bottle rockets. Up next were the firecrackers. After lighting up the firecrackers, however, I noticed my garage was open all the way across the yard. I told Sophia I'd be right back and walked over to it. I went inside and turned on the light. Every drawer and every closet door had been opened. I called my dad first thing and let him know somebody broke into the garage and possibly robbed us. He had a typical reaction.
Are you serious? Aw, shit. What did they take? I don't know,
I told him.
Alright, hang tight, I'll be home in a sec to check it out.
So my dad was momentarily leaving the party down the block to come check it out. When I got back to the deck, I told Sophia, and she was just in shock. She went to go look herself, and when she came back, we just sat there outside on the backyard deck, waiting. Eventually, I decided to just shoot off the big missiles anyway. I couldn't wait anymore, and it was July 4th after all. Sophia told me to go for it. The first missile was huge. It practically lit up the whole backyard for a second. I loved it. But I knew these 2 missiles were not cheap, so I thanked Sophia again. I lit the second missile, and during those initial few seconds as the fuse was burning, me and Sophia both heard a large branch snapping on the ground from the woods. We both looked in that direction, and as the rocket exploded in the sky, it provided just enough light to see a figure in the woods facing us. We both screamed simultaneously, just in time for my dad to hear. Me and my dad both chased in that direction into the woods, but we couldn't see or hear anything. We completely lost the person. Later that night, we turned on the security camera in the garage that we hadn't used in a long time. At maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, when I was finally going to bed, I looked out my window for the heck of it, and the garage light was on. Me and my dad went to check it out. This time the entire garage had been completely trashed and some of my dad's expensive tools were missing. We went back to the house to check the surveillance footage, and we were disturbed. In the footage, the lights turned on, but the camera was blocked by something. It seemed like a piece of paper. We rushed back to the garage to check it out, and found a simple post-it note taken from the desk in the garage, stamped onto the camera. And in writing on the notes were the words, "Happy Independence Day, fuck you." We never found the robber. Four years ago, I took my youngest sister and her 2 friends trick-or-treating. I'm 18 now. I was obviously 14 during the time of this story, and my youngest sister was only 7 at the time, along with her 2 friends, who, of the 2, I'll only name one, Mary, for privacy reasons. I didn't have plans anyway, so I guess I was actually a bit happy that my parents made me walk with them. Plus, I low-key told my sister to fill an extra bag for me at each house. By now, we were more than a mile away from my house. The girls' bags were all pretty full now, and I was ordering them to start making their loop back in the direction of our house. The girls were approaching the front door of a corner house across the street from an old, closed-off community park. The house already stood out from the rest on the block in that there was a 3-foot wooden fence surrounding the perimeter, except for the walkway and driveway, and a bunch of overgrown trees and bushes on the front lawn, almost completely blocking the actual house from view. They tried looking for the doorbell, but then called back to me that there wasn't one. I answered back, telling them to just knock on the door. My sister pounded on the door in 3 different intervals. Then I called for them to skip this house. As the three girls were walking down the stoop, the front door to the house creaked open, and somebody could just barely be seen poking their head out from behind the door, which was open just a crack. The girls walked back up the stoop and simultaneously yelled "trick or treat." From the sidewalk, all I could see was an arm reach out from around the door, and then the person's pointer finger lifting up as if to say 1 second. The arm kind of creepily pulled back into the house. My view of it not seeing a body made the situation really eerie. The door closed, and for what felt like 20 seconds, they just stood there on the stoop. I was about to ask them what was going on, but once again the front door to the house cracked open. Once again, just an arm came into view for me. This time I could see him waving the girls to come into the house with his hand. My sister and her two friends were actually making their way into the house before even looking back at me for approval. At this point, the feeling in my stomach told me something wasn't right here, and I yelled to the girls to come back. The really disturbing part was as soon as I yelled this, the person shut the front door, almost slamming it in their faces. The three girls came back over to me. I told them that was enough trick-or-treating for the night. I nudged them to continue walking forward, keeping my eyes on the house. Barely through the overgrown bushes in front of the house, I saw the blinds to one of the front windows rustling around, and an older man sitting by the window. We continued walking home now. The girls told me the man initially said, "1 second while I go get the candy," and then shut the door. When he came back out, he whispered to come inside to get the candy. I was considering calling the cops and reporting this guy, but I wanted to get home and see what my parents had to say first. We were probably halfway down the block when I turned around and saw a person standing by the corner of the block right where the house was. We made it back to our house where I told my parents. They called my sister's friend's parents, and when they got there, we all had a long conversation about it. We then all drove over to the house in separate cars, with my mom talking with the 911 operator in the car. When we got to the house, we learned before the cops even arrived by a neighbor that the house had been vacant for months. Mary's dad was the quickest one to realize what was actually going on here. A sexual predator, or maybe even worse, was hiding in the house for Halloween, waiting to lure unsuspecting kids into the house to snatch them. And what scares me the most to this day was that my sister and her friends were about to enter that house before I told them not to. Halloween can be a very dangerous holiday. Two years ago, I was home on Halloween, and for the most part, it was a pretty normal day. Since Halloween was on a Friday, all of my friends were out partying. However, I was doing homework. Not one of my most exciting nights, but I didn't mind too much. I really had to get this homework done anyway. My mom and dad were handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters as they usually do. My house doesn't usually get many because we're pretty much the only house on the block that hands out, so it's often ignored because it's not worth their time. Tonight was no exception. Later that night, my mom calls me down and tells me to watch the door for trick-or-treaters because my neighbors had come over asking for help with their costumes for a party. So my neighbors and my parents both went upstairs to work on the costumes, leaving me alone downstairs. It didn't bother me because I had finished my homework and I could just play my PS4 while listening for knocks on the front door, which was close by. Only a couple more trick-or-treaters came in about an hour. Pretty typical for this area. However, around 11 p.m., I heard a knock at the door. I thought it was pretty weird since it had almost been an hour since the last knock, and it was pretty late for trick-or-treaters to still be out. Regardless, I grabbed the candy and went to answer the door. It's important to note that there's a small room in between the front door and the living room. When we answer the front door, we make sure to lock the door behind us leading to the living room so our dogs don't run up and start barking and whatnot. I did the same thing here. When I answered the door, there was a surprisingly large man, at least 6'3" tall, with a somewhat muscular physique, standing in front of me wearing a Michael Myers costume. Not a cheap one either, it looked pretty expensive for a costume. He stood in front of me but didn't say a single word. I thought it was pretty unusual because it's kind of customary to say trick or treat. But nope, he didn't do a thing but stare at me. It was almost like he was a statue. I thought he was really trying to sell the character and creep me out, and it was working. I was feeling a little intimidated because I'm pretty small for a guy, only about 5 feet 10 inches tall. I decided to break the awkward silence and say trick or treat for him while handing him some candy. I couldn't believe what he did next. In response to me handing him candy, he took a few steps into my house. This was when I started getting really uncomfortable. You're supposed to take the candy, say thank you, and go. It's like an unspoken rule that you don't walk into people's houses without permission. It was at this moment that I also noticed that he didn't have any type of bag for candy. This was a huge red flag, because I realized then that he was not there to trick or treat. Before I could respond, the man reached into his pocket and pulled something out. I didn't want to look at it, but I was assuming it was a weapon, and I had no idea what to do. I'd locked myself into a small room with a psychopath much larger than me holding a weapon, blocking the only exits. We all like to pretend and make up scenarios in our heads where we have to be the hero and save the day, but here I was, stuck in a real-life situation, completely unable to move, not able to save myself. I was frozen in fear. It was such a weird feeling, almost like I was dreaming the entire thing. I had no control over my body. And what a cliche way of dying I thought it would be, getting stabbed to death by someone dressed up as Michael Myers on Halloween. Thankfully it didn't go like that, because without warning, the guy takes off his mask and jokingly says, "I'm just messing with you, bro." I'm still frozen in shock and can't respond in any way. He then says, "I scared you though, right?" Completely confused and still afraid, I managed to respond with, "Yeah, you got me." He put the knife back in his pocket, which gave me a huge sign of relief, and said, "I didn't really come here to trick or treat, but can I have that candy anyway? I'm really hungry." I didn't hesitate to give him the candy because he creeped me out, and he still did have a knife. He then goes on to mention how he just left his friend's Halloween party and he saw my lights on and decided to prank me. It was obvious that he was drunk and high and thought knocking on someone's house pretending to be Michael Myers qualifies as a good prank. He mentions how he owns a tattoo place about an hour away from here, and even says that I'm pretty chill and that we should hang out sometime. He tells me to put his name and number in my phone so we could chill soon. I make sure to take his name and number down. After all, the last thing I wanted to do was upset this weird guy still blocking my only exit with a knife. I basically agreed to everything he said because I was still terrified and just wanted the conversation to end as soon as possible. But this conversation seemed to go on for hours. Despite this, I still didn't feel comfortable or safe. I had to find a way to get this guy out of my house. There was something way off about him, and I got vibes that he was a dangerous person. So I decided to make up a bullshit lie and say that I had something cooking in the oven that I needed to check on and that I'd text him later. And it worked. He said okay and turned around to leave my house. I could not close and lock the door quick enough when he left. My heart was still beating so fast that I thought it was going to burst from my chest. That was easily the most terrifying and weirdest experience of my life. I decided to not contact the police though, since the guy didn't have any malicious intent. I guess he was just completely out of it and just a overall really creepy person. I still have his number to this day, but we've never texted or called each other, just the way I'd like it. As terrifying as that situation was, I can laugh at it now and use it as an interesting story to share with my friends, so I guess one good thing did come from it. Just be careful who you open your door for on Halloween. There's some very weird and messed up people out there. I got lucky this guy wasn't a complete psychopath, because nothing was stopping him from stabbing me. Halloween used to be my favorite holiday, but ever since one not-so-sweet round of trick-or-treating, I've kind of switched over to liking Christmas the most. 2006, I was 14 years old. Me and Johnny, my best friend at the time, were going trick-or-treating together. I remember it was a Tuesday night, so everyone had school the next day. That meant the craziness with the teenagers going around with TP and shaving cream wasn't as extreme, nor was anything really. My parents wanted me back by 11 o'clock the latest, same with Johnny. It was around 8:30, I would constantly check my wristwatch. We were down a bunch of blocks close to the woods and the highway by the east end of town. This would likely be our last year of trick-or-treating, so we were trying to get as much candy as possible. We rang doorbell after doorbell. As the night wore on and the amount of kids outside lessened, the number of people answering their doors also decreased. Then it started to drizzle, and that's when it really became a ghost town outside. But that didn't stop us. We were now 3 houses down from the house that was commonly known around there as Hell House. It was nicknamed this because of the alleged murder that happened inside decades ago, plus the fact that the house looked like it was built over 100 years ago and stuck out from the other houses 2 miles away. There was even a whole webpage dedicated to the house with a little lore behind it. I don't really remember the full details anymore. The website is down now, but at the time nobody seemed to know if anybody lived there or not. At the time I was sure the neighbors knew, but we didn't live very close to the house. Long story short, me and Johnny were feeling brave and cocky, so we hopped the creepy fence surrounding the seemingly abandoned property and walked up to the stoop, which was made out of ancient and worn-out looking red bricks. We knocked on the door a few times since there was no doorbell. The drizzle turned to rain, and we suddenly didn't want to move out from under the front awning. Johnny jokingly knocked on the door again, but my focus was shifted to walking home in this rain. Suddenly, a loud thud made us both jump. Johnny said it sounded like it came from a window upstairs, to which I replied, "Let's leave." We walked quickly back down the red brick pathway, hopped over the front black graveyard-like gate, and stopped to look back at the house on this dark, rainy Halloween night. Johnny bumped me on the shoulder and pointed to the upper middle window of the house, and I felt like my heart dropped from my chest when I saw somebody clear as day staring down at us. Only there was something so disturbing about this person's face. I couldn't tell what it was through the rain and foggy window, but I swear that face and just this whole scene seemed like something you would see in a horror movie. We both jumped once again when the person at the window quickly and aggressively turned and seemingly ran away from the window. All we could assume was that they were coming outside after us. We quickly went to hide by the neighbor's fence, which was facing the backyard of the house. The sound of the rain thankfully masked the sound of our breathing and whispering. This neighboring fence was made of wood and had a bunch of holes, allowing us to peek through to the lawn next door. Suddenly, the entire fence started to shake a little, yet we couldn't see anyone on the other side, and we were certain it wasn't us who had done it. Johnny and I agreed it was time to make a run for it back to my house. We both stood up, and when we turned to run, I saw something at the edge of the fence. At first I was confused as to what it was due to the darkness, but it soon hit me that this was a person leaning over to this side of the fence, exposing their body down to their waistline with one arm reaching around the fence. The way this person was positioned and staring at us made for a horrifying scene and memory. We dropped our candy bags and ran for it. After running 5 blocks and my getting a few cuts and bruises from tripping twice in the rain, we got back to my house. We agreed not to say a word given that what we did could probably get us in trouble. The really scary part is the next day after school, we went to go ask some of the neighbors over there if they knew who lived there, and they all gave the same response. They had no idea if anybody lived there or not. They never saw a car in the driveway or anybody outside. One of the neighbors even pointed out that the house had a for sale sign very briefly a few months prior, but disappeared within a few days. We told all of the neighbors our story, and they were all very disturbed by the news. I moved out of that neighborhood in 2007 the next year, and I've never had to worry about the story behind that house or who was living there since. All I know is something strange was going on inside of that house, and I kind of wish I found out what.
Mark was a college student living in Indiana. His house was quiet and sat next to some woods. During the day, everything felt normal, but at night, the woods made the place feel strange. Behind his house, under the patio, there was a hot tub. That's where everything happened. It was Saturday night, March 29th, around 12:30 a.m. Spring break was ending and school was starting again soon. Mark had his 3 close friends over, Kyle, Keenan, and Derek. They were spending one last night hanging out. They were in the garage playing pool, blasting music, and drinking. Everyone was laughing and having fun. It felt like a good night. After a while, Kyle said they should go in the hot tub. It was cold outside, so the warm water sounded even better. Everyone agreed. They got changed into swim trunks, grabbed their drinks, and went into the hot tub. The warm water felt good as they talked, made jokes, and didn't pay attention to the time. Then they heard something. It was the sound of sticks breaking, like footsteps coming from the woods. It didn't sound like an animal, it sounded like a person.
They all went quiet and looked around. Keenan tried to calm everyone down and said it was probably nothing. The others laughed, but it was more to stop feeling nervous. They turned the music up louder and tried to keep talking. About 10 minutes later, a man walked out of the woods. He stepped into the light from the patio. He was wearing a long black coat, white sweatpants, and a gaming headset. His eyes were wide, and his face didn't show any feeling. Everyone jumped. They yelled at him and asked who he was and what he was doing. The man raised his hands and said his name was Seth. He said he was 33 years old, and he heard them laughing and wanted to join. The guys just looked at each other, confused. Mark told him to leave, but he didn't listen. Instead, Seth took off his coat, then his shoes, and then his pants. He was now in only his underwear. Then he got into the hot tub. No one knew what to say. Mark pulled out his phone and started recording, not for fun, but because the whole thing felt unreal. This was the footage he captured.
Wait, I smoked the drink right there. What was over here?
They started asking Seth questions, like where he came from and if he knew anyone there. He just kept saying he heard them laughing and wanted to hang out. Then he said something really disturbing. He said he had molested a child. That changed everything, obviously. The guys jumped out of the hot tub and started yelling at him to leave. They pulled him out of the water. Seth didn't try to stop them. He just stood there, dripping wet and staring. Then he slowly walked back into the woods without saying anything. The group ran inside and locked all the doors. Some of them laughed nervously, trying to shake it off, but Mark and Kyle didn't feel okay. They felt like it wasn't over. About 15 minutes passed. Kyle said they should go back out to lock the hot tub. Mark said okay. So they got flashlights and stepped outside. That's when Mark saw something next to the hot tub. It was a phone. He picked it up and saw the screen light up. Whatever was on the lock screen made him drop the phone. He didn't say what it was, but it scared him. He said he thought Seth would come back, so they ran inside and told the others. Everyone tried to stay calm. Then they heard a tapping sound on the window. Mark already knew who it was. He opened the curtain, and wouldn't you know it, Seth was standing right there. His face was pale, his eyes were wide open, and he had a creepy smile. He didn't say anything, he didn't move, he just stared. Mark yelled for Kyle. Kyle ran in and called the police. Mark grabbed a bat and went to the front door. He yelled for Seth to leave and take his phone. Seth didn't answer. Instead, he slowly walked around the side of the house. Mark followed a little bit and looked through the patio window. Seth was standing there again, staring inside. Mark told him the cops were coming and that he needed to leave, but Seth didn't move. He just slowly raised his hand and waved once. Then he turned and walked back into the woods. The police arrived a few minutes later. The guys told them everything. The officers searched the woods and found Seth standing alone, just looking toward the house. They arrested him for trespassing, and everyone thought it was over. But Mark didn't feel that way. A few days later, he saw a post on Snapchat from a girl who lived nearby. It was a video. It showed another man, not Seth, trying to break into her house late at night. That's what bothered Mark the most. It meant Seth might not be the only one out there. There could be more. They could be connected, and they might not be done. A few years ago, 3 high school friends named Beck, Matthew, and Tyler decided to explore a sewer tunnel in their neighborhood. It was winter and very cold outside. The tunnel was at the edge of their neighborhood, under a small creek next to some office buildings. These buildings were empty and dark at night. The boys had seen the tunnel before, but never went inside of it. It always looked creepy, and they joked about it, but deep down they were curious. That night, they finally decided to go in. They brought sleds with them, thinking it would help if someone asked what they were doing. They knew they weren't allowed to be there, but they wanted to do something exciting. Just as they pulled into the parking lot, a police car showed up. A police officer got out and asked what they were doing there. Someone had apparently seen them on the security camera. Tyler quickly said that they were just going sledding. The officer looked at them for a moment, then told them to leave. So they left. but only for a little while. After driving around for about 30 minutes, they came back. This time, they parked farther away, behind a building where no one could see them. They walked down a hill behind the buildings. They could see their breath in the cold, crisp air. They stood in front of the tunnel, noting how big, round, and completely dark inside it was. They turned on their flashlights and walked in.
Turn off your light, everybody. Okay.
Yo, look at that.
Dude, this is oh, look at the date, dude. Oh,
6/19/19.
dude, 19. Oh my god, this is
Dude, how did we even find this? Oh my gosh.
Inside the tunnel, the ground was dry. It was quiet, except for the sound of water dripping deeper in. The walls had graffiti all over them. Most of it looked old, but one thing caught their eye. A date was spray painted in large red numbers. 6/19/19. The paint looked newer than the rest, like it was done recently. That made them feel uneasy. Their flashlights weren't very strong and didn't shine very far. Still, they kept walking and acting tough, but deep down they were nervous. The farther they went, the colder it got. The temperature was dropping fast. Even though they were underground, they could still see their breath. The walls looked like they had ice on them. Big icicles hung down from the ceiling. Some were huge and sharp.
keep it slow,
Oh, I see a light down there, see it?
I think I saw movement. Wait. What's that? Hello?
So keep going?
Did we keep going?
Move forward. Bro. Dude, and these icicles can like impale you, dude. Look how
Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoing from further down the tunnel sends the group fleeing in fear. The sound resembled something heavy hitting stone. It wasn't any of them. The sound came from deeper inside the tunnel, too far to see. They tripped, slid, and bumped into each other as they rushed to get out. When they got outside, they were shaking and breathing hard. That's when Beck noticed his phone was missing. He had dropped it while they were running. Tyler and Matthew told him to forget about it. They didn't want to go back in, but Beck didn't listen. He grabbed his flashlight and started walking toward the tunnel again. The others followed, but they didn't want to. The tunnel felt different this time. It felt even darker. The air felt heavy and strange, like something was wrong. Their flashlights didn't work as well, and the silence was even worse than before. It felt like something was watching them.
I feel like
I feel like my pocket got like a little emptier over here. Like somewhere over here. Matthew, go over here this way.
no, dude, that's when we fucking heard the noise.
Shit, dude. Do I have to go back there?
You're going first, bro. It's
No,
your
yeah,
phone.
we're not leading the way. Yeah, somebody else lead the way, please.
No, it's your phone.
At some point off camera, Beck found his phone. Afterwards, the group continued deeper into the tunnel investigating. And that's when they heard a sound.
That rock. It must have hit like here or something.
What was it? Do you remember?
A loud scream came from deeper in the tunnel. It echoed off the walls and felt like it was getting closer. They didn't wait. They turned and ran as fast as they could. This time, no one talked, no one looked back. They just ran. They got to the car, jumped in, and drove away without stopping. The car ride back was mostly silent. The three friends thought it was over when they all got home. They were ready to move on with their lives. But late that night, Beck's doorbell rang twice. This was at some off hour in the night. When Beck's dad went to answer the door, nobody was there. This, of course, begs the question, were the boys followed home that night? Or was it simply a very unfortunately timed ding-dong ditch? That remains a mystery. The night left more questions than answers for the three friends, but they all heard the noises and of course got it on video. Perhaps it was something they weren't meant to stumble upon. In April of 2022, a man named Connor took a construction job far from home as part of a 3-month accommodation program. The pay was decent, and he needed every dollar. He wasn't in the best place financially, and the bonus of working alongside his longtime friend Jim made the opportunity more appealing. They figured it would be a nice change of pace, extra cash, time away from home, and some peace from the chaos of everyday life. The job itself wasn't bad. A few weeks in, Ryan had adjusted well to the routine, but the area they were stationed in was remote, deep in rural countryside. There were long, winding roads with barely any signs of life. It wasn't unusual to go miles without seeing a single home. Ryan had always loved the outdoors, and he saw this isolation as a chance to unplug. Most of his coworkers blew their weekends drinking, but Ryan had different plans. He wanted solitude. He wanted quiet. So when Friday rolled around, he packed his gear and prepared for a weekend of hiking and camping deep within the woods. A narrow trailhead just 5 minutes from his temporary accommodation became his entry point. Within 20 minutes, he was deep in the forest. The only sound was the wind and the crunch of his boots. He smoked a couple joints as he made his way further in, letting the stress just melt away. The isolation was comforting for him. Well, at first. Around 7 p.m., the sun began to sink behind the treetops. Shadows stretched long across the trail. Ryan knew it was time to find a place to settle. That's when he noticed something unusual. There was a scent in the air, burning firewood, and a light layer of smoke drifted between the trees. At first, it seemed normal, maybe another camper, maybe a local. But then, he caught something just barely in the corner of his vision. The faint orange glow of fire flickering through the trees. Curious and confident, Ryan left the trail and headed towards the source. He wasn't scared. He trained in combat sports during his teens and stayed in good shape. Still, something about this felt off to him. As he moved closer, he began to see strange metallic glints. Shopping carts, dozens of them. They were tied to trees with rope hanging for the branches. Some mangled and suspended in bizarre positions, like a twisted jungle gym of rusted steel. It didn't look like a campsite. It looked like a ritual site, like something meant to be seen and feared. Ryan pulled out his phone and started snapping photos. He had to prove this to his friends someday because no one would believe it otherwise. Then, something even stranger caught his eye. Hung directly above the fire was a charred, old-fashioned duck ornament. Sitting in the duck's back was a scorched baby doll. The thing was melted, its limbs warped from heat. Ryan took a photo of that too, but the longer he stared, the more disturbed he felt. His chest began to tighten. The fire was roaring, clearly tended to recently. There were water bottles scattered around. Someone had been there, or currently was there, maybe still watching. He thought about turning around, thought about heading straight back to the trailhead, but something made him keep walking. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just some weird loner, maybe drunk, probably harmless. Still, he checked over his shoulder more than once. 20 minutes passed, and he'd put real distance between himself and that eerie camp, but daylight was fading fast, and he needed firewood before it got too dark. He veered off the trail again, this time to gather supplies. He wasn't worried. He had emergency wood in his pack, but not enough to last the entire night. He needed more. After about an hour of preparation, Ryan had set up his tent and built a small fire. It was around 9 p.m. when he prepped a steak and potato meal in foil and nestled it in the glowing embers. He smoked another joint to dull the anxiety, and for a while, everything seemed okay again. With his meal finished and the fire crackling, Ryan settled in for the night. He turned on a pre-downloaded playlist of true crime podcasts, listening to cold case files as the forest around him darkened. There was no signal out there, no distractions, just firelight and static-filled voices recounting unsolved murders. At some point, he drifted off to sleep, but it didn't last. He woke up suddenly. The air inside his tent felt colder. The fire outside had dimmed. He checked his phone. 4 a.m. He didn't know what had woken him up until he heard it. Whistling. A slow, eerie tune carried through the trees surrounding his camp. He froze. His body wouldn't move.
It was like something inside him had shut down. He lay motionless, listening as the sound crept closer. Then the whistling stopped. What followed was worse. Soft footsteps, fast, light, and quiet, circling his tent. He couldn't see them, but he could hear them crunching twigs and shifting leaves. His heart pounded in his throat. Then, without thinking, his body finally snapped into motion. He jumped up, threw on his boots, and burst out of the tent. What made it worse, what twisted the fear into something primal, was that the footsteps had come from the direction he had entered the trail. The way back to safety was now blocked. He had no choice but to run deeper into the forest. He sprinted as fast as he could, crashing through brush and low branches. But behind him, he could hear more footsteps, multiple, and they weren't in sync. The sounds overlapped, too fast and scattered to just be one person. There were two of them, maybe more. For 5 straight minutes, he ran until his lungs burned and his legs begged for rest. He found a dense cluster of trees and dove into the underbrush, burying himself in leaves and tangled roots. He didn't move. He barely breathed. The footsteps faded, distant now, but he didn't dare come out. He waited, still and silent in the dark. Eventually, he knew he had to move. He crawled through the forest with branches cutting into his arms and legs. Every step was slow and careful. When the trees finally began to thin, he broke into one final sprint. He recognized the trailhead, the way out, and he ran without stopping. No one followed him after that. The forest was quiet, but the damage was done. He got back to his accommodation and immediately reported the incident to the police. They took his statement and promised to investigate, but he never heard anything back. To this day, Ryan believes the people who chased him were the same ones who built that bizarre shrine of carts and dolls. What they were doing out there and what they wanted, he doesn't know, but it was more than just a creepy encounter. To him, it felt ritualistic, cult-like. He finished his contract and returned home, but the memory never left him. He still remembers the sound of the footsteps, the whistling, and the feeling of helplessness. If there's anything to learn from this story, it would be to trust your instincts. If you find something that doesn't feel right, you should leave. Ryan almost didn't, and he knows he might not have lived to tell the story if he had stayed. This video was me experimenting with a slightly different style. If any of you have personal scary experiences that include photos or videos and you'd like to submit them, email them to me and I'll try to make this style of video a new series. Also, if you haven't already, click the bell icon and turn on all notifications because apparently only 15% of you have done so, and that would really help out the channel.